Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Amber Valley series. There are 35 parishes in this beautiful slice of eastern Derbyshire. Here's one for your viewing pleasure. Welcome back to Amber Valley, everybody. Now today I brought you to the very northern tip of the district and to a place which has 3 of its 4 settlements listed in its name, but you already knew that because you've already clicked on this video. There's one that's not listed within it, but I'll cover that in due course. I'm beginning in Dethick, and this is the parish of Dethick, Lea and Holloway. This video is sponsored by Bassett Law Pro Clean, specialist floor and upholstery cleaners based in Retford, Nottinghamshire. Do you have a commercial space, own a restaurant, hotel or pub, maybe an office block? Bassett Law Pro Clean cover the entire country for commercial work. And they have a special offer. Quote the Village Idiot when you inquire and get a massive 7.5% off. Need it cleaned by the experts? Contact Bassett Law Pro Clean now. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Welcome to the northernmost tip of Amber Valley, everybody. This is Dethick, Lea and Holloway, a parish which contains 4 settlements as opposed to the advertised 3. They vary in size, but for more than 100 years they've been one administrative entity, and that harmony continues to the present day. Located within some of the highest hills in the district, Dethick is the smallest of the bunch. It contains a church and a farm and a few other buildings, but it pales in comparison to its bigger brothers. Lea is a village that's famed for an outdoor activities centre. Named Lea Green, we'll be encountering that on a walk which will also take in Holloway with its connections to Florence Nightingale. The 4th settlement is the youngest, but it's the most important from an industrial standpoint. Theoretically, you could say there are 2 more. The southeastern area of Holloway is known as Leashaw, whilst the collection of houses scattered among the hills to the east is known as Upper Holloway. Leashaw is the location of Lea Hurst, famous for being built by the Nightingale family as their summer home. The Nightingales were the most notable local family. They were substantial landowners and spent several summers in the area. There's a few big hills to climb in this one, and some of them are pretty dangerous. Do take care if you follow this exact route. I definitely don't advise it. Let's go and have a look at it all, shall we? The connection between Dethick, Lea and Holloway goes back centuries. The 3 have been a single entity for over 100 years. We start with Dethick, the smallest of the settlements in the parish, and one that's, generally speaking, off limits. That is, apart from the church. Dedicated to St John the Baptist, this and its churchyard are the only publicly accessible landmarks. A small edifice made of stone, this dates from 1220 and it overlooks a valley. It has a chancel, nave and a tower with 1 bell. There are 3 memorial windows here too. The tower is the newest part of the church, dating as it does from 1535. In the churchyard I found a history board which tells you a lot about the Nightingales and their connection to the area. There was a sundial too, near the tower. Dethick has a much more interesting history than a lot of people would know. The most notable family to be associated with Dethick were the Babingtons of Dethick Manor, and you've heard that name before. Anthony Babington was executed for his role in a plot to rescue Mary, Queen of Scots, from the nearby Wingfield Manor. Okay, so the rest of Dethick is all private property. It's all farmyards and buildings around those farmyards. Manor Farm is the main farm in there, which you would have seen a glimpse of from the churchyard. But of course, the church is the only public space in Dethick, effectively. So as long as you keep to the footpath, you are fine. Now, time for a main walk, and we're going to walk around both Lea and Holloway together. It's quite a big route, this, so I hope you're ready for a long walk. It's going to be tough on these legs, because I do know there's plenty of hills involved in this. I'm not going to lie, I'm glad I'm now in Lea. I didn't want to say anything while I was in Dethick because I think it was a little bit inappropriate to, but I'm going to make a mention of it because I'm actually quite annoyed. There was a guy who came to speak to me about standing literally on the edge of the farmyard whilst on the public footpath, may I add, and he wasn't too very happy about it, to be honest with you. Well, all I'm going to say is at no point did I stray from the public footpath, and I stayed within everywhere that was publicly allowable. Churchyard and the path which goes through the farm, absolutely fine. So if there's any comeback from that, then I can prove my innocence, basically. Right, let's forget about Dethick now, because we're now in Lea. Now what this main walk is going to do is it's going to start in Lea and work its way down to Holloway, and then we're going to come back up to Lea again to finish, and then we'll go to the fourth settlement, which is within these boundaries. I'm sure a few of you are going to be wondering what it is at this present moment in time, aren't you? But you'll soon see. Our trip around Lea and Holloway starts at Lea Hall. This was the former childhood home of Florence Nightingale. Mainly 17th century and Grade 2 listed, the house is now one of the grandest holiday apartment complexes in the country. Lea is mentioned briefly in the Domesday Book. There it was recorded as Lead, and it was owned by Ralph Fitzherbert. The Nightingales have plenty of connections to buildings in Lea. In fact, you don't have to go very far to find another. This is Lea Chapel, built in 1671, and it's believed to have been linked somehow to Florence Nightingale's relative, Thomas. A few more steps and we find a parish notice board next to an empty phone box. Tick DLH off, folks, we've 12 to go. By the way, for the purposes of making this video, I will often refer to the parish as DLH. The parish council use that acronym on the regular. Lea has a small park with play equipment for the youth of the parish. This occupies a central green area off Lea Main Road. Housing-wise, Lea is very clustered in its layout. There are 4 or 5 narrow streets, each with lovely stone cottages. This little hut may look like a bus shelter, but it's not. There is a stop on the main road though, served by the number 140 and 141. Back to the main road, here we have the only pub in Lea, the Jug and Glass. Again, this has links to the Nightingales. It's 200 years old and was originally an inn for travellers. It's reputed to be the site of Florence Nightingale's first hospice. At this point, you'd be forgiven for thinking that every property in Lea was Nightingale related. That's not the case though. Okay, so we've reached the coach house, which is the house you can see behind me. And behind the camera, there's another very impressive property. It's much bigger and much grander. It's called Lea Green. Lea Green was once a country house built for Joseph Wass in the 17th century. He was a wealthy local smelter and miner. In 1908 it was greatly expanded by J.B. Marsden Smedley. Since 1960 it's been an outdoor education centre. Marsden Smedley was also responsible for Lea's rhododendron gardens. We can't see them though at this time. That's because in the autumn they're closed for the season. Instead, I made my way down this very steep path to Church Street. Let me tell you folks, this is small fry compared to what's coming later. The hills only get steeper and steeper. At the foot of the hill is another old chapel. I believe this was a Wesleyan chapel originally, dating from 1838 or 39. No such queries with the school. Lea's primary school has been here since 1859 and was enlarged 30 years later. A peek through a hedgerow after the school gives us our first glimpse of the area's main religious building, Christ Church. Although we're still in Lea, Christ Church is defined as being in Holloway. It's a modern building dating from 1901. Its tower was added in 1910. It's a Grade 2 listed building and it was designed by the architect P.H. Curry. In its grounds I found this matrix with poppies on it, left here by the 3rd Matlock Cub Scout group. Pretty, I thought. The church was originally a chapel of ease to St John's in Dethick, but now it's become the main place of worship in DLH. It does have a small churchyard, but the main cemetery separate to the church is close by, straddling the border with Holloway. From here you can appreciate just how high up in the Derbyshire hills you are. Look at this stunning view of the valley below. Okay, the road starts to flatten out now and you are in Holloway. We've just come across the sort of boundary between Lea and Holloway, but it's kind of all sort of one village, if you like. There's not really a boundary. But anyway, here we are then in Holloway, and the first thing we have to see here is the cemetery. Here's Holloway Cemetery, board there telling you about it here on the left. And also here you've got a mortuary chapel right there and your entrance to the cemetery. Holloway Cemetery is built into that steep hillside we walked down earlier. It's operated by DLH Parish Council. Next door to it you'll find a block of public toilets. These are within something called the War Memorial Gardens. The gardens run up the hill. This shelter remembers a member of the Marsden Smedley family, lost at the Battle of the Somme. We're now on, effectively, Holloway's main street. This is the largest village in the parish and has more Nightingale connections. I don't think this building can claim to have one though. This is the former Holloway United Methodist Chapel, now Holloway Trinity. This is the only active Methodist church in DLH. Originally there were 6. This one was built in 1852 by John Smedley. Next is Mayfield Stores, but it's not a normal shop. Instead it's just a post office, but it's good to see a rural one still open. Hillside is the road you can see opposite us here. You see that hill behind it? We're going to have to climb that shortly. The Old Mill next. This was built by Peter Nightingale, Florence's great uncle, in 1784, and it spun cotton originally. And next to that is a bus stop. Holloway is served by the same 140 and 141 buses that serve Lea. They both go to Matlock. Well, here we are then at the end of the road, and we're going to take a left turn then now as we start to make our way back up towards Lea. There's still plenty to see here in Holloway though, including this building that you can see opposite this junction here where this little green is. This building right here is the one I'm talking about. Let's go across to that next. On Mill Lane is the Florence Nightingale Memorial Hall. This is the village hall and it's available to all residents within DLH. It's been the heart of village life here since 1932 and it's available to hire for any community organisation in the parish. Across the road is where the mobile library parks. I was lucky to catch this. It visits Holloway just once a month for 20 minutes. Now we need to walk up Mill Lane to the west in order to find our route back to Lea, and this is a shallow hill. As you climb, you'll pass the local surgery on the right. This is part of the same practice as the one we met in South Wingfield. The road has now become Yew Tree Hill, named that for a former pub called the Yew Tree, which closed in 2008. The road on the other side here is Chapel Lane. Now a house, the chapel in question was Primitive Methodist, built in 1852. Holloway continues with some more stone cottages, typical of the kind found in these upland areas. They have a good view. In fact, I can show you that view. How about this? Gorgeous, with the sunbeams now starting to find their way through the clouds. Next up is Maycock's Butchers, a local institution since 1850. Robin Maycock and his wife took over the shop in 1977. It's now run by their children, Jonathan and Emily. Almost next door is Chase Cafe, but this has struggled recently. That's down to a landslip from the hills above, which has closed this road for more than a year, severely denting their footfall. Now at this point here I gave myself a choice. Do I go up this footpath here, or do I carry on down there and take the road instead? This looks very steep, but the road's very steep as well, so it's kind of a case of which one do you think is better. I'm going to go for the path because even though it's probably steeper than the road, it's going to be shorter. This will take us back up to Long Lane eventually, and that will take us back up towards Lea. You want to know how steep? Check this out. The road is up there, so it's not a long walk, but I'm glad there's steps. This is extremely steep. Unbelievably steep, in fact. You've got to be so careful. Yeah, don't try and follow these steps, people. I wouldn't like to fall at any point along here, because it's quite a long way down. Okay, I'm almost at the road. I have to tell you, definitely do not follow this path. This section here, which the camera is trained on, has no handrail and a sheer drop to the right hand side. I've had to walk on the edge, baby steps, really, really difficult. Do not recommend. Anyway, the road is literally just there, so I've made it thankfully in one piece. Before we leave Holloway behind, let's talk about Lea Hurst. This sits to the south of the village and has perhaps the heaviest of all the connections with the Nightingales. Originally a 17th century farmhouse, Lea Hurst was developed into a country home on the orders of Florence Nightingale's father, William, in 1820. It has 15 bedrooms, large by most people's standards, but not by those of the wealthy gentry and aristocracy. This is where the Nightingales spent their summers, typically 3 months of every year. Otherwise, the family lived in the 80-bedroom Emley Park in Hampshire, where they were neighbours of Lord Palmerston. After the last of the Nightingales died in World War II, the house became a nursing home. It stayed that way until 2004, when it was no longer financially stable enough to continue. Lea Hurst is now primarily used as a family home, but the owner has made a Florence Nightingale suite and 3 other suites available to paying guests as B&B accommodation. To make our way back to the start, we first have to navigate Upper Holloway, a collection of houses atop that steep hill. Once through them, we're now on Long Lane, and this has some of the most spectacular scenery yet. Look at this view. Next up is the War Memorial, an obelisk found right at the top of the Memorial Gardens. There's 21 names on this one. This next building is the tea rooms at Lea's Rhododendron Gardens. Both this and the gardens reopen in March. The gardens cover 3.5 acres. They're free to wander around, but you can voluntarily donate to their upkeep here. To get back to the start, we're following a footpath around the back of Lea Green. From here, you can see some of its equipment. Check out this climbing frame, for example. As well as being educational, Lea Green is great for team building exercises. And we now find ourselves back in Lea, just a bit further south from where we left it. We're in that maze of narrow streets. However, we only need one of them, Sledgegate Lane, which runs towards Lea Main Road before joining it near the phone box. You'll have noted there are a few new developments in this part of Derbyshire. Let's hope it stays that way for many a long year. Okay, and here we are at the phone box in Lea, which we saw earlier in this walk, about an hour and 3/4 ago. Big long route, that one, and definitely very challenging in places. Got to be so careful of those hills. Good job I've got my boots on today, because in trainers, forget about it. Not a chance at all. Now, I'm going to go back to the car at this point, and we're going to go to the 4th settlement, which I keep talking about. In theory, this is actually the most important settlement within Dethick, Lea and Holloway. It's called Lea Bridge, and it's got mills. This is Lea Bridge. It's the youngest settlement of all in the parish, and it has one major landmark, John Smedley's mill. This is an active cloth mill, and it specialises in knitwear like polo shirts and sweaters for both men and women. It was originally founded as Lea Mills in 1784 by two men we've already mentioned, John Smedley and Peter Nightingale. It specialised in the production of muslin and spinning cotton to send out to local cottages with hand-frame looms. The company soon extended its activities to include knitting and hosiery manufacture. This is where long johns are said to have originated. By the turn of the 19th century, John Smedley was running the business alone, although the Nightingale family retained an interest. As Lea Mills remains open and operational to this day, John Smedley claims to be the world's longest running factory manufacturer. The site straddles a brook at Lea Bridge. This was by design, as the water was used to clean yarn and power machinery. Now, I imagine that if you look on the map of Dethick, Lea and Holloway, the average person probably wouldn't notice Lea Bridge straight away, and that's because it is right on the boundary with the Derbyshire Dales. In fact, on this bridge, I'm standing on the border between Amber Valley and the Derbyshire Dales. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a little walk which will go between the two. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head this way, down this road here and into the Derbyshire Dales, and then come back through that wood over there. That's Lea Wood, and back to the car here. But if you want to see where that goes, you'll have to stick around until next year, because it will be in one of the Derbyshire Dales episodes that's coming out just after Christmas. I'll see you there on the other side. And that's it for Dethick, Lea and Holloway. I reckon of all the ones I've covered so far in Amber Valley, that one's been the best. There's so much to digest. Do come back next year to see where that little walk was to take me though, because literally yards away is something incredible. For now, it's time to be off to the next one. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.